Welcome everybody for another episode of The Partnership. I'm excited to be back with Eric Chan, the VP of Partner Ecosystem at Vadro, and before that, Head of Partnerships or a Partnerships Leader at several companies, including Chargebee. Great to have you, Eric.
Thanks, Franz, for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I'm pretty excited about this one because it's a topic which isn't often talked about, which is the engagement between CSMs and partner managers. And I know you're really passionate about that topic, so I wanted to dive straight in. Why do you think that CSMs and partner managers don't work together as often as they should? It seems like their salespeople and partnerships leaders or product people and partnerships leaders are much more in sync.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of answered part of the question, which is, there always seems to be a natural alignment between sales and partnerships, right? It's pretty clear, like partnerships are there to deliver, sales accepted leads, pipeline, top of the funnel, all that good stuff. And dealing with or talking to customer success seems to be, not even a secondary thought. It's maybe, at the bottom of the list, unfortunately. And the short answer is, I think it's a little complicated, right? I wish it was just as easy as waving a magic wand and saying, "Hey, customer success partnerships, we got to do something. Let's go do something." But as I've been doing this for a little while and trying to work with different success teams, what I find difficult is that a lot of the goals and incentives are just not aligned from the beginning. So, for example, how many partnership leaders or teams are ever goaled on growing NRR or impacting NPS? It's not something that we often talk about, right? So if you're not even there, it's already hard to kind of get in and try to impact their numbers. I would also say that success people are sometimes too busy firefighting, or they have their own set of KPIs that are really dealing with customers. And so based on that, maybe they just don't have enough time, or they just don't have enough resources to really be effective in working with partners.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, as a customer success manager, you're basically the second line defense. I guess there's support, and then if that doesn't work out, you're the second line of defense when it comes to like making sure customers are treated well and also like are renewing. What do you think would like shared goals between partnerships and CSMs look like? Like, what would it look like when you have a joint goal on like NRR or something like that? Why should you as a partnerships person care about that?
Yeah, so here's where I'll put a story in place from my experience at Chargebee, and this is where we had tried to put some shared goals in place, and so I'll kind of start off there. So we had a new partner that we recently integrated, tech partner. We wanted to make a big splash, just like everyone does. We wanted to let prospects know, customers know that this new solution was going to help expedite and automate things. I'm sure tons of people out there are used to doing like some kind of CSV export or just using some kind of janky data connector to kind of make things work. So obviously the partner and us were pretty motivated to make sure that there was some return on investment, getting installs, all that great stuff. So we did some mapping of customers, the partner and I, and identified that there were a couple hundred mutual customers. So looked great on paper. The numbers looked like it would be a good return on investment, right? Mm-hmm. So then we got the partner marketing person involved, put together a campaign. We came up with some incentives for the CSMs in terms of like spiffs for every connection that was made and that type of thing, right? So everything looked great. And then from the CSM point of view, we got the partner to schedule a training webinar, get together some collateral, and actually identify the list, right? So that we could start handing it out to the specific CSMs. So all of that, seemed like checked all the boxes, did everything we needed, and then we just sort of waited for the CSM team to do their part. So we waited for a month, and then we waited for a quarter. And unfortunately, at the end of it, we only saw about maybe a dozen installs out of the couple hundred that we thought were initially identified.
Mm-hmm.
What happened? What did we do wrong? So, at the outset, right, when we were planning this whole campaign, we had strong alignment between myself and the leader of CS. Where I think it fell apart is we didn't think about 1 and 2 levels down. So the team leads, in this case, we had team leads by segment and then by geography. We probably should have involved them a little bit more. And then the other key thing was for the ICs, unfortunately, it was kind of pushed on them as another set of action items to do with all the other things they had to do for that quarter.
Yeah.
And if their KPIs were over here and we were asking them to do something over there, we're not sort of thinking about how to line them up or try to make them complementary.
Yeah. We had that same pushback at Hopin a while back. Like when we started out with our agency program, like we tried to get people to sell additional agency services. We tried to get CSMs to sell agency services or additional integration partners because the partners want more installs. And we saw that if somebody installs, they're more likely to renew. But the feedback we got from a lot of the CSMs and a lot of the leadership at Hopin at the time was, we already have so many products ourselves. We don't want to like confuse our AEs and our CSMs more by like introducing all these partner products that you could put on top, right? Like, how do you counter that? How do you know when a CSM should bring in a partner versus just offer their own solution or manually fix a problem?
That's a tough one because I think it's a balance that the CSM wants to stand out amongst all the pieces of the tech stack that a customer might have, right? But also understanding that hey, I need to focus on making my product the shiniest one, the most important one, and hopefully the linchpin for everything else that you're losing, right? And so if we think about it in the context of a renewal, think about it like this, right? You need to think about it as, what is the most important thing? Is it the renewal of your product, or maybe even take a look at what that value that partner brings, right? Because typically, like, well, a service partner is a little bit different, but let's take a tech integration, right? The tech integration hopefully is some kind of complementary thing. It enhances some workflow, does some automation. And the two parts of it are, is it critical that you work with the partner and have a side conversation just between the two of you, right? You and the partner, or is it actually necessary to bring that partner in as part of the renewal? Because you could find that, there's an opportunity for a bundled sale or a bundled upsell. It could be that maybe they've grown beyond, what that initial product is, and they actually need some additional things as well. And so how do you have that kind of conversation, again, with the partner alone, so that you guys can strategize a plan and then figure out how to bring in the partner if it's necessary? Because everyone likes to show that you're trying to be helpful, and doing it tactfully and in a really thoughtful way really shows to the customer that you're really trying to benefit them and make them successful.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we had a similar experience at Hopin as well, because like the way we ultimately cracked this problem of like overloading CSMs too much is like really capturing like share of mind, right? You really want to make sure that like one partner or one stack of partners solves a specific problem. So in our case, we were a virtual events platform. We had a lot of customers who needed translations or interpretations because their events were international. They had like English and Spanish and German speakers, etc. And so every time that question came up in their conversations, they would remember like, oh, we have a partner for that. And that was probably how we won it, rather than like going actively out and saying like, hey, you guys need to hawk more translation services. Like, it probably needs to be always sparked by a customer need and identify like with a specific, like, specific row in an RFP almost. Like, what are the tools that somebody needs, and like, here are the different partners which can solve that. I'm curious just about another problem I faced. Like, this is like basically me asking you all the questions I had when I was building out our program back in the day. How did you solve the problem that CSMs might feel like service partners are infringing on their business or on their job, right? Because we had that problem internally where we built out an events services unit, and then we would like facilitate some of the events for customers. But CSMs, while they weren't events professionals, oftentimes did a lot of the like education around setups, etc. themselves. So they felt like, hey, is this infringing on our core function within the company? What does that mean for our future at this business?
Yeah, so I think obviously for Franz and I, we're both at product companies, so we'll put it in the context of service partners, right?
Yeah.
Or SIs. And I actually think that you're right. CSMs sometimes feel maybe nervous to introduce someone like that because they can't maybe control the situation. They want to make sure that they're bringing someone quality to the table. But I actually think of it a different way. Is I think that it's, again, going back to making the customer happy, right? Driving that success. It's a great way for the CSMs to flex. And what I mean by that is maybe you pick a service partner that's willing to do some, initial consultation. Sometimes they even offer, free audits as a way to introduce themselves, what they're able to do, what kind of services they offer, without the pressure of like, hey, immediately you're going to be charged, time and material for just even this first conversation. Right?
Yeah.
Because the goal for the CSM shouldn't be thinking about, hey, again, fighting fires, solving these product issues. It's driving that long-term relationship. And for the service partner, right, especially when you're talking about mid-market or enterprise clients, they probably are already using consultants, right? Whether it be for their implementation or for some ongoing purposes. And so, if you don't have one to suggest, why not just ask your customer who they use, especially the ones that they've been happy with, the ones that they've had a really good experience with, and even willing to recommend, right? Because then you can take that to the partnership team and then see how they can maximize that for more of your customers.
Yeah, that's something which, it resonates a lot, because we found out like pretty early in our journey of building out the partner program that our CSMs actually already had a whole host of service partners they were working with. It was like very informal. It was like the friend of somebody, or like some service partner or agency was like hustling their way into the CSM work by talking to every single CSM. And through that, they got a foot in the door. But they already had basically an informal list of agencies they would send customers to if they needed something they weren't doing. And what we realized is that if a CSM is cagey about like working with a service partner, or cagey about like handing off a client to a service partner, it's often because they haven't defined like clear, responsibilities. They haven't defined clearly like, what am I responsible for? What do you do, etc. And so they feel insecure in their job. They feel like they might lose their job if the service partner is coming in. And so it's really important to like, calm those egos and calm like minds about like, what is everybody's responsibility, right?
Yeah, it's almost a little bit also like reputation management, right? So like a completely outside analogy is like, Franz, I'm going to suggest, now that you moved to closer to where I physically live, like, hey, I'm going to recommend you a restaurant. Well, I'm obviously not going to recommend you a restaurant that like I had a bad experience or I don't even know the food. I'm going to obviously recommend something with confidence, like, hey, I've eaten here, a dozen times, or maybe I know somebody who works at the place, or runs the place, right? So it's a little bit of like that reputation that the CSM's also trying to uphold and maintain.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I saw we got a question from the audience, but I have one last question myself, and then we're going to go right into that next one because I think it's going to be important in order to justify investment into this collaboration. But before that, like a big topic for me, which we just discussed, is like rules of engagement. Like, how do you know, or how do you draw these ground rules of like when a CSM should engage a partner versus when it should be delivered in house, and what are the kind of pitfalls that you could encounter during this process?
Yeah, so I think, having this type of process where you do have rules of engagement is super important. It clarifies a lot of things, and it actually puts a lot of the thoughts that you and I might have in our head on paper, so that it's there for everyone to see. And if you think about the existing teams that are in place, whether it be partner managers and CSMs, it's a great reference point to handle the different situations that come up. But also, if you think about it, right, we're always having new people come in, right? New team members join. And it's a great way for them to really learn what are the processes and procedures for working together. And so the two items that I'd really focus on for driving a really effective rules of engagement document is communication and transparency. So I'll go into those in a little more detail. So open communication between the two departments is really important because we're really there to focus on the customer, right? We can have some infighting between the departments is fine, but ultimately we got to do what's best for the customer. So by having this document, right, and being open on how we communicate, it'll identify what exactly we're trying to solve. And then to the second point, transparency. So if I don't tell you all the details as a CSM, what's going on with the customer, and I don't tell the partner manager everything, how is the partner manager then going to articulate to my peer over at that partner organization what exactly the problem is, right? So being able to be super transparent, we're all on the same team, again, focus on driving customer delight. So if the document can really focus on, again, open communication and transparency, then you're on the right track, right? So it's okay to overshare, right? Because that's where you're going to find, nuggets of hidden, quality or problems that you just didn't realize were there, right? And then because it's a living document, make sure you try to update it either quarterly or every 6 months, just to make sure everything's up to date.
Yeah. How do you make sure people look at a document though? I feel like that's the biggest challenge, right? You like write down the rules of engagement and then nothing happens. Like it just gathers dust, and then all of a sudden you have all these issues, and you tell people like, well, it was in the rules of engagement, but how do you make sure they actually look at it regularly and remember that there are rules of engagement?
Yeah, so this is so then this goes kind of to the strong people skills or organizational skills that I think a lot of partnership teams have, which is you can't just, like you said, hand over a document, here's the link, everybody, in the Slack channel, and like hope you read it, right? It's got to be a lot of follow-up. And Franz, I know you and I know this really well. It's like you have to follow up with internal teams all the time, almost every day, every week, every month, etc. So that's where, we've built a framework in the past where I would have a regular cadence with the department heads, right? So in this case, CS, every 2 weeks. And it was kind of like a check-in, what's going well, what's not going well, what do we need to try? But on top of that, we would also have a designated POC from each department, kind of do like the weekly tactical side of things, so that we could kind of keep a running list of, hey, here are all the things that are happening right now. Here are things are, in resolution, or it's in process, or, oh, actually we got this one or these, 2 or 3 things solved this week, right? And then, typically a month before the end of each quarter, we'd kind of try to find some time to huddle between CS and partnerships, so that we could think about what do we want to do for next quarter. And that would give a way for us to do some planning, because, sales might have something, product, I don't know, leadership might have a few things, marketing for sure, right? And so partnerships, you have to squeeze your way into hopefully getting 1 or 2 initiatives. for the next quarter. And so by doing that, we try to really negotiate how partnerships can impact CS. And then last but not least, as needed, right? Why not bring someone from the CSM team who maybe knows a lot about a certain partner integration to your partner QBR, right? They can get some firsthand knowledge and some insight about what exactly we do and how we actually try to do things, and hopefully that sort of makes an impact.
Yeah, I really like that because as a CSM or also as an AE, like having been an AE in the past, like I know how monotonous the job can feel at times. And so it's surprising how, excited team members get when they actually get to be partners, when they actually get to step beyond their role, when they actually get to see like the bigger picture than just their individual role every single time. So I love the idea of like bringing a different CSM or a different team member into your partner QBRs just to make sure that like they can share knowledge to the partner as well, and you create more nodes and links in the ecosystem.
Yeah, so I call that, right, I think I mentioned it before, is like this whole multi-threaded relationship thing, right? So
Yeah,
it's not just AEs, it's executives, it's product people, it's sales people, sales engineers, as many people as possible, so that you can build that connectivity, right? Because
yeah,
I don't personally need to know everybody at a certain partner, right? Like it would be impossible for me to map everything in Salesforce that I need to know.
yeah,
But if I have a handful of people, let's say 8 or 10 people from the company, all different functions, we probably can start mapping out all the right people or all the right teams we need to interact with regularly to accomplish what the customer is asking of us.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Cool. Let's change gears. There's a really good question in the chat. And also, if you're watching this live, make sure to drop the questions you have in the chat for Eric to answer. The question we got from the audience was, how do you measure whether a partner helped with a renewal? And I think talking about CSMs, like the main thing I care about is the renewal and like obviously net revenue retention and NPS scores, but the customer needs to stick around. And how do you make sure that your partner actually helped with that rather than just being another thing you add on to a deal?
Yeah, so in partnership land, we talk a lot about attribution, right? Because that's how we kind of generate our numbers. And this one's a little tricky, right? Because this is in the zone of what partnership people call partner influenced, and that's always a really tricky one because on the one hand, we know that they help, but on the other hand, your leader, whether it be like the CRO or the CEO, doesn't care about influence. They care about like net new deals or this and that, right? And so sometimes there's a very challenging way to calculate it accurately. I know probably Franz and other partnership leaders like myself have just like been racking their brain, like how do we make sure that we can justify this kind of metric. And so what it tells me is like, number one, it's maybe not that mature, so that we can say, hey, do steps A, B, C, and this is the outcome, right? Because sometimes the pace of the deal, you need to have some agility or flexibility to kind of run different plays or try different things. But also, actually, specifically to this one, I have an experience where we were working with the renewal.
Yeah.
And we suggested that we implement this one partner to help. But then during the process of the renewal, we actually had to figure out a way to tap out that first partner and tap in another one. So if you can think about like that as a complexity, like, not only are you introducing two different partners, but you had to orchestrate how to maneuver them in and out to close the renewal. And so sometimes this is where it becomes tricky to always have that, precision about measuring it accurately.
How did you tap out that partner? I'm so curious about the story. Like what was the conversation like when you had to like switch out?
So in this case, it had to actually do with a service partner. And so we initially brought this service partner in because we said, hey, they have these capabilities, they know how to do some implementation in this set of tech stack. But what we found out was that yes, they could do it, but some of the use cases were a little bit beyond their expertise. But also then it started turning into like, okay, expertise plus availability plus price. And so we just kind of had to have like a quiet conversation with the customer to kind of elicit that feedback, because while they wanted to do it in front of the partner, it just made it easier, I guess, because of the CSM relationship, to do it, quietly between the two of us.
Yeah.
And then so we eventually said, okay, now that we know your requirements, let's make sure we nail this correctly and find
Yeah.
those key things that are important to you, and then tap in a new partner.
Yeah. I feel like these moments of crisis are also a great opportunity to actually strengthen the relationship with a partner. On
Absolutely.
first look, it's a very negative thing if you have to swap a partner out and give them the hard feedback that, hey, you just don't have the skills to actually deliver for this customer. We need to bring in
Right.
somebody else. But it's
Right.
also a great opportunity to hold up the mirror and then say, these are the skills you need in order to win more deals in the future. We believe in you. We here are the resources to actually upskill your team. Let's win more deals in the future together, right? It doesn't have to be the end of the relationship just because you shut them, shut one door. You can just, try the window after.
Yeah. And again, it could be a whole set of reasons. I mean, the ones I just gave are just, scratching the surface. There could be all kinds of reasons. Maybe, mismatch in industry or verticals. They don't understand, that deep customer need, geography, location, whatever all the different variables are. So
Yeah.
I mean, giving people, the benefit of the doubt to hopefully win the next time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's interesting because oftentimes, like with partners, some junior partnership leaders might have like artificial harmony with their partners, and they say like, "Hey, everything's always great," etc., and be afraid of conflict because it might backfire. But I think this conflict is a really important growth opportunity for you as a partner manager and for the partner to actually strengthen those bonds. Curious just about like, how do you scale that kind of like initial CSM and partnerships collaboration? Because we talked about like it being difficult to measure, and then we also talked about like you need to manually like ping people regularly with the rules of engagement, etc. Like, what would this look like if you actually like try to like get a team of maybe like 20, 30, 40 or more CSMs to work with partners?
So just like everything else, you got to start really small. So identifying out of the pool of CSMs, who's willing to raise their hand, who's willing to kind of work with us, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like building an MVP, right? What's your viable product that you can deliver between the partner and the CSM together? And then once they see some success, right, you got to celebrate that. You got to make a big deal about it. In our case, we, just I think like a lot of companies, you have your sort of monthly all hands, or maybe the revenue team has like their monthly all hands. And so you have to sort of celebrate that win, no matter how small it is, because you want to show that like, hey, this person took the time, they took the effort, and they did something about it, right? And let people know that like this person, was able to, enable this big renewal, or, introduce this partner, which made them grow, even faster than expected, right? And then see how you can repeat that either with the same person, or maybe someone else is like, hey, I saw my buddy do that. I want to do that too. I think there's a customer that kind of fits the same thing, right? So you want to also draw out that curiosity, to help to have people even take these somewhat calculated risks.
Yeah.
And then again, just repeat that, celebrate the win, to keep driving that influence, right? Because then, 2 or 3 people start winning. Well, then you're going to start building, a lot more of a coalition to say, okay, I think we need to take this seriously. This is going to have a big impact on, my set of customers I'm managing.
Yeah.
Or it could be another technique to help close or, renew that customer.
Yeah, I love that. Partnerships often starts grassroots in organizations. Like you don't need to enable 100 CSMs all at once. You just need to start with like the three who really get it, and you put them
That's
on a
right.
weekly call. And then when they win, you just show everybody like, hey, these people like they have a winning strategy, and then more CSMs will get interested, and slowly you convert the entire organization. rather than just, you know, creating one pagers and forcing them down everybody's throat, which never works for anybody.
I think the other thing too, though, is with the CS leadership, whether it be team leads or, you know, ultimately the person responsible, you need to also build that framework to say, can we even introduce that concept? Because they might be, you know, very protective and say, well, my CSM team has, you know, no more bandwidth, you know, they can't do anything, so it's got to be all of this and none of that. And I think if you can somehow build even just a little bit of a bridge, right, and that framework to put that in place, I think that would go a long way. Because you have to constantly experiment, right? You can't just be like, hey, I figured it all out, I got this, it's just going to keep running like this forever, right? I mean, we know that things change quickly, and we just need to, you know, be adaptive.
Yeah. So we are at time, Eric, and I know you're busy, so I want to make sure that, you know, everybody can get on with their day after this. But this was super informative. Where can people go if they want to find out more about you and about how to leverage CSMs together with partnerships?
Yeah, so thanks for that. So actually, a former ChargeBee colleague of mine who was in the success organization, Matt Clark, he and I are actually going to have a longer workshop where we're going to go into this in a little more detail. And it's going to be in January 11th. And I think we'll put together a link to how you can register. And we currently have early bird pricing now, so if you want to take advantage of that. And if your company has an education stipend, you know, maybe you can use that to register now before the end of the year. So hopefully, you know, those who are interested, and we'll go into a lot more detail, a few other stories to tell, as well as, you know, some tips on how to put all this into place.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm a big fan of like these very specific niche workshops where you go into one specific topic in partnerships rather than all of partnerships as a whole, because partnerships has become such a big, you know, area where you need to really like hone your specific expertise in like smaller areas, like for example, that CSM collaboration. This was great. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll make sure to drop the link to the workshop in the chat after this show. And if you have any questions, Eric, where is the best place to reach you?
Yeah, just hit me up on LinkedIn. Pretty active there. And so find me and we can start a conversation.
Awesome. And yeah, thanks to everybody who watched today live. You could have been anywhere and you chose to spend this half an hour with us, and that means the world to me. So thank you for joining us. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with our last show of the year. So see you then.
Thanks, Franz.